Labels are what show your consistency. It shows that you've actually thought out your positions and that they are all consistent within a certain spectrum that you can like point to something and say they come from here. This is what I believe and this is where they come from, and that's why I can say I'm a conservative or I'm a neoconservative or I'm a paleoconservative or whatever. Like you're able to point at these things and say, hey, look, these are my consistencies. This is why there's so many other people that believe the same things as me, because we all have the same starting point and then went from there. Like within the Republican Party or within conservatives, we still have disagreements. Like there's room for disagreement. It doesn't mean that just because we all had the same starting place that we all had to end up at all of the same places on literally everything. And now we all drive the same cars and have the same haircuts and everything. Like that's not the case. We all have differences within our own communities, and we have debates and all of these things. But um we still show consistency along a line to say this is where we started and this is where we finished. Because I said that Kyle Rittenhouse should be arrested, he automatically assumes I'm on the left, or he automatically assumes I'm a
Sure,
liberal,
sure.
and then starts saying, well, Bill Clinton's a bad guy. And it's like, well, that has, and you and I have had this conversation numerous times where you guys say like, oh, you're on the left because you agree with BLM or because you agree with Black Lives or Antifa, or because, like, again, I can't draw those things my from the Bible. Like, I can't draw those things from being a conservative. I can look at facts and change my mind on things. And so I'm able to still be a conservative, still be a Republican, and agree with Black Lives Matter at the same time. Whereas and this is one of the problems with like right left narratives right now, is people believe that like somehow being a part of the Black Lives Matter movement has something to do with whether or not you're liberal or conservative or right or left, and it just doesn't. We have the right. Now, this is all according to like poli-sci definitions, so it's not necessarily what most people seem to mean when they talk about this stuff. I'm starting to find out more and more. I thought we were all using a poli-sci definition, and turns out we're not. So So, in order to be right or left, your values have to start with something. In order to be right wing, your values have to begin with liberty. Like, that is the most important part to you. Nothing matters more than liberty. Okay? In order to be on the left, the most important thing is equality. So, if you're on the right, it's not that equality doesn't matter to you, it's that you think the most important thing is liberty. And that if your freedom, your liberty, meaning your rights, your freedoms, if these make it to where there is an unequal outcome or an unequal opportunity, doesn't matter. What's more important is that you have your rights, right? The left is more worried about equality. If they have to trample on your rights in order to get equality, they're going to. Now, the left believes that the more equal everybody is, the more equality we have, the more rights and the more liberty that we will have as well. Whereas the right believes the more liberty we have, the more rights we have, the more equal everybody will be. So each one values the other thing. They just believe that the starting point is different. So this is where you show your consistency. Is your starting point. What is more valuable to you? Then, under these labels, we have progressives and liberals on the left, conservatives on the right. Now, conservatives believe in rights and liberty over all else because they believe that God gave us rights, that these are God-given rights. They didn't just happen there. They didn't just pop up. So if the Bible says thou shalt not steal, makes it sound like you're not allowed to take somebody's property, which makes it sound like God wants you to have property, right? This is one of the most fundamental cornerstones of liberalism, of living in a liberal society. When I say liberalism, I don't mean like being a liberal versus a conservative. I mean liberalism, as in we live in a liberal society. The right to own property is maybe the most fundamental part. Like, if somebody steals your stuff and starts running off with it legally, you're allowed to shoot them. So, meaning that according to the government, property is above all else, including life. But when I talk about whether or not I'm right or left, I say I'm right wing because I value liberty and individual freedoms over equality. So other people will hear that and say, oh, or how, if I say like, how will you find out if somebody's right or left? I'll say, okay, I'll ask them if they voted for Trump. Like, okay, what else? I'll ask them if they like Black Lives Matter. I'll ask them if they're in favor of gun control. I'll ask them if they like Antifa. And it's like none of these things actually have anything to do with right or left, right? I'll ask them if they're in favor of cancel culture. These things have nothing to do with whether or not you're on the right or on the left. Now, most people, as I'm figuring out, when they say right or left, they don't mean right or left. They mean Democrat or Republican. That's what they mean. They're not actually talking about the right or the left. They're not talking about values. They're talking about political party. That's not what right or left means. Right or left has more to do with your axioms. Like, imagine your axioms. So, your axiom is your most fundamental belief. Like, if I keep asking, if you say you have a belief and I keep asking why, and you give an answer, and I ask, well, why do you believe that? And you answer, and I say, well, why do you believe that? Eventually, you will get to your axiom. And when you get to your axiom, and I say, why do you believe that? You can't answer anymore. It's impossible to answer your axiom. You can't explain it. You will always get to an axiom. Everybody, no matter what, everybody has an axiom. So imagine your axiom is like a tree. Okay? And The axiom is the roots. The trunk is whether or not you're right or left. But then your branches are whether or not you're conservative or progressive or liberal. And those will decide all of your beliefs from there. Whether you want to recognize it or not, all of your beliefs will come from there. Most of your moral beliefs will come from whether you value liberty or equality. Now, not everybody who values liberty is a conservative. There's such thing as right-wing liberals. They exist. There's no such thing as a right-wing progressive, though. And actually, most liberals are actually right-wing. Most of them do not favor any of equality over liberty. They are the actual centrists in the world. And then from there, you get all of your policy positions. So, axiom, the trunk is your moral value system, which normally leads to either liberty or equality. Then the branches are going to be what beliefs come from that, which will put you into a group of either progressive or liberal. And then your policy positions come last. Your policy positions are all based on everything we just mentioned. Those are all the final point. That's the final thing you get to. It's your policy positions. And these are your leaves. You're only able to get to these points through your moral prescriptions. Now, when it comes to morality, we have prescriptive and descriptive. Descriptive is I can name a fact in the world. So I say children in the world who grow up without a father figure are more likely to commit crimes. Okay, that is a descriptive moral claim. Prescriptive would be, I think we need to get rid of welfare in order to help mothers be incentivized to keep the father in the household. That is a prescriptive moral claim. So we can take the descriptive and get to a prescriptive. That's the only way we can get there. Is we have to take the facts and then add some sort of moral claim to that. So say somebody's house burns down because someone from Antifa threw a Molotov cocktail in there. How do we decide if this is wrong? Well, you can either say the Bible says that thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill. We can use these sorts of prescriptive ideas to say that, because these are our axioms. Axioms can never be proven. So we'll take our axioms and compare and relate those to this scenario and say, okay, they burnt down their house. Is this right or wrong? Well, according to our axioms, you're not supposed to do stuff like that. So it's wrong. Some people will say, well, I am in favor of whatever leads to the most happy people. Well, if 10 people in Antifa were happy burning down the house of 2 people, then it is moral because more people were happy than the people who were unhappy. This is how we get to our claims. Now, even the person who says, I want the most amount of people to be happy as possible. If you ask that person why, they can't explain. They can't tell you why they want the most amount of people to be happy. If they do explain it, then that is not their axiom. Normally, the answer to why is that your axiom, the answer is normally just because that's what I believe. But regardless of what your axiom is, you have to show consistency within it. I can't flip-flop on axioms. I can't flip-flop on my moral claims. I can't decide one day I have this moral claim and another day I have a different moral claim. I can't say, well, it was wrong for those cops to shoot that black guy in the back in the Wendy's parking lot because he was retreating. But then, when it gets to Kyle Rittenhouse and he's retreating, you can't say, oh, he didn't have the right to protect himself. They should have been allowed to attack him. Because that would be inconsistent. This is how it works. Whether you want to acknowledge it or not, moral principles lead you to moral statements. What is justified in the world is justified based on these moral statements. Now, if I'm not a Christian, and why would I care about murder? Why do I care that murder is bad if I'm not a Christian? The answer is, it's not really bad. In and of itself, murder is not wrong. But we can't run a society if everybody's running around murdering each other. So we make it a law that you can't murder people. And we frown upon it when those do murder others. Outside of that, you can't really answer why murder is wrong. It's almost impossible. For a Christian, they would say the act of killing is wrong in and of itself. Why? Because the Bible said so. That's it. No other explanation. Killing is wrong because the Bible says it's wrong. In reality, there isn't a moral claim to make to say why murder in and of itself is wrong. The act itself cannot be wrong. The act itself only matters based on what your beliefs are. Now, lots of people are what you would call a consequentialist. So I can say murder is wrong based on what the consequences of it are. If killing this person saves 5 people, then it's okay. Or You can be, I think it's called a rationalist, where you say, why did they murder the person? That's what matters. Why did they do it? Why did they kill that person? Now, I am a rationalist. So I would say, why did Kyle Rittenhouse shoot those people? Was it to defend himself? Okay, then it was right. It's okay. It's now justified. A utilitarian wants the greatest good for the most amount of people. So if you say Kyle Rittenhouse killed 3 people to save his own life, well, that's 3 lives for 1. 3 people had a bad outcome. 1 person had a good outcome. This is immoral. The 3 people are more, therefore matter more, therefore have a greater outcome. So Kyle should have died. This is common on the left. Utilitarianism is common, but you can't have pure utilitarianism. Only nutcases believe in pure utilitarianism. They believe in a type of utilitarianism. They believe in some utilitarianism, but nobody can be a 100% utilitarian. They like it if they are, they believe in ridiculous stuff. Imagine there's 5 people, there's a really bad car wreck in like a big suburban. There's 6 people in this suburban, and the driver gets hit, really bad car wreck. They all go to the hospital. The driver has a broken arm. They put him in a cast, put a sling on him, tell him to go wait in the waiting room for the rest of his friends. While he's waiting there, one of the people in the accident has a messed up kidney. He's losing a kidney. The other person is having heart failure. They're going to lose their heart. Another person has a punctured lung. They're going to lose their lung. Another person is going to lose their leg. Another person going to lose their liver. Okay? 5 people, 5 different body parts. They need them in order to save them. So the doctor, according to a utilitarian, would walk out to the one person in the waiting room with the broken arm and say, "Sir, we have to kill you so that we can take your body parts and give them to the 5 people." That is utilitarianism. One person's good should never rise above 5 people's good. But conservatives will never go that way because we believe in the rights of the individual, not of the collective. This is the most important thing in the world. This is why I am right wing. This is why I am not left wing. This is why I'm not a utilitarian. Utilitarianism is all about equality. I am not all about equality because equality should never triumph the right of the individual. The man waiting in the waiting room should never have to give up his body parts if he does not want to. Now, there are some harder moral questions within here that get into some sticky grounds. Some harder questions that are a bit harder to answer. These cross over both the utilitarian ideology and the individual rights ideology. So there's scenarios like the trolley thought experiment. You're on a train, it's heading down the tracks. Go straight and then one side splits off. Over here, you have 5 people tied to the tracks. Over here, you have 1 person tied to the tracks. Now, you can make a choice to pull a lever and make it veer off to where it only kills the 1 person. But if you do nothing, it's going to kill the 5 people. One way or the other, you are violating someone's individual rights. Indecision is a decision. If you understand the consequences of not pulling the lever, it's as if you put it there in the first place. It is the same thing. Lots of people who don't like to take responsibility for their own thoughts and their own actions and their own morality will say, oh no, I didn't personally put the lever there. I didn't personally make the train go, and I didn't personally tie these 5 people to the tracks. So as long as I just let the tracks take course, it's not my problem. It's not my responsibility. That's not true. Indecision is a decision. You are still responsible for what you do just as much as what you don't do. These are the same things. Not doing something is also doing something. You can't cop out of this one, okay? Don't be a weasel. This is how it works. Your choice not to do anything and letting it run over the 5 people is still a choice to let it kill those 5 people. So one way or the other, you are violating someone's individual rights here. If one way or the other, you are violating somebody's individual rights and choosing to kill somebody, the utilitarian approach is probably better because you're choosing to kill less people and violating less people's individual rights. So it's a little bit sticky. It's not simple. This is hard. But equality, utilitarianism, these are not things that make sense in the real world. So this is why I'm right wing. When you guys ask me, well, if you're in favor of Black Lives Matter, then how are you really right wing? I will ask you, what does Black Lives Matter have to do with individual rights and equality? Black Lives Matter is about fighting for Black people to not have their individual rights violated by the judicial system, which will make them more equal. The Black Lives Matter protest is a right-wing protest. The organization is a left-wing organization, but the movement is a right-wing protest. When you ask me if being anti-fascist, how can I be anti-fascist or Antifa and still be right-wing? Fascism is anti-rights, anti-liberty. Fascism, it is the exact opposite of freedom. It's not the opposite of equality, but it's the opposite of liberty. So, is being anti-fascist right-wing? Or is it left-wing? When we talk about these things, these are the definitions that I'm using. These are the ways that I'm thinking about it. These are my consistencies. These are where my consistencies lie. Most of you believe that you're being consistent, but I don't believe that your consistencies dive this deeply. I don't believe that you've thought these things down all the way to your axioms. But I have. It's definitely true that I agree with the left on a lot of things. The left gets the normative or the descriptive claims right, more often than the right does. Say something like climate change. That was always scientifically true. But you had all of these people who were on the right saying, oh no, I don't believe in climate change. It's not real. It's left wing propaganda. It's this, it's that. They were wrong the entire time. They got the facts wrong. And so when it comes to something that's normative or descriptive, those things are not right or left. The left has more like academics. They get the facts right more often, not always, but they get them right more often. And so something like climate change, it was always correct. It was always right. It just took right wingers getting educated enough in order for them to finally fall in line. The information didn't like, it's not like all of a sudden we finally got enough information to where we finally believed it. It was that right wingers were putting out so much propaganda and changing it to like global warming and stuff like that, trying to make it sound like a super scary thing just to keep the left from winning, just to push back against the left. The right is full of reactionaries, people who don't truly have their own policy beliefs. They don't truly have their own like moral or ethical systems. All they know is that whatever the left does is dumb and stupid, and we don't want to do that. That's all they know. They don't know anything past that, which is why people like Ben Shapiro and Tim Pool and Steven Crowder, like these are anti-SJW sorts of people. All they know is that if it sounds leftist or the left came up with it first, then it's automatically bad. But climate change, you just had to be educated enough on it in order to finally believe it. I feel as though it's the same with Black Lives Matter and with Antifa and things like this, is people just don't have the right amount of education because there's so much propaganda out there from the right wing. There's so much out there where they're just like, if you truly were worried about black people getting shot unjustly by the cops, you wouldn't only focus on the bad things about the protests. But you don't ever hear any of the people that I just mentioned talking about the good things in the protests. And they don't advocate for any of this stuff. They don't advocate for it. They don't push for it. They don't try to say like, hey, we should just change the name to something else, guys. Stop calling ourselves Black Lives Matter. That name has been tarnished. Let's call it something else and advocate for that. They don't ever do that because they don't care. They don't care about it. All they care about is the fact that this is a movement that was started by the left. And so therefore, we have to push against it. That's it. That's the end of it. There is no more thought process to it. They have confirmation bias to the point to where they will take like an article that is pro Black Lives Matter, and in that article, if they're willing to admit that there's a couple parts, like a couple issues wrong with Black Lives Matter, but the overall analysis says that Black Lives Matter is a great movement that's doing a lot for the black community, they'll still take those one or two parts in there that said something negative about the Black Lives Matter and just take that out by itself and try to use that as evidence for why Black Lives Matter is bad. These are people who don't normally admit any sort of fault with their rationale. Whereas, like, if they were in an article or in it looking at an analysis of Black Lives Matter that was willing to admit that there were problems, like, these are people who are willing to admit that there's problems here or there, but that doesn't make the overall big picture bad. My issue is I'm willing to take the normative claims, the descriptive claims, and say, okay, Black Lives Matter is a movement that is just pushing back against police brutality. And it's not even just for Black people. Like, they're pushing back against police brutality. And I can take that and say, okay, these are facts. This is the information. This is what they're meant to do, is to push back against police brutality. So I'm on board. I'm going to help with this. I'm going to advocate for this. I'm going to protest. I'm going to be out in the streets. I'm going to be on my show. I'm going to be talking about this. I'm going to be educating people. I'm going to vote for representatives that are in favor of this, and those would be the prescriptive claims. Now, me and the left will disagree on what the solutions are to a problem, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. But if I deny the problem in and of itself, then I'm denying facts. I'm like outright denying facts. If I'm saying that global warming isn't a real thing, it's not a problem, we don't have to worry about it, I'm denying facts. If I say that Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization, that it's a broken organization, or a terrorist movement, any of these things, if this is all I ever say, then one, I'm obviously wrong, but two, my bias is so far gone to where all I care about are the wrong things. Like, people within Black Lives Matter, they're still against protesters rioting and burning stuff and all of that. Like, they're still against that stuff, and they have spoken out against it a million freaking times. But that doesn't, like, in Christianity, there's Christians who are alt-right, and they go out and commit mass murders and shootings, and it's become fairly common in the United States, where they just go out murdering people. Is Christianity bad now? Like, a common thing that I hear from people on the right is they keep saying, like, oh, the protest was overall peaceful. Just a couple buildings got burnt down. Like, people could use the same exact arguments against Christianity. Like, oh, they're overall charitable people. They're overall, for the most part, good people. Only a couple people committed mass murders. Yeah, right. These are the same arguments. You can't judge, and if you are right-wing, you judge people based on an individual basis. You don't use this identity politics sort of thinking where, like, oh, they identify with Black Lives Matter, and this one guy burnt down a house, so they all technically burnt down that house then. No, that's ridiculous. There are facts that we can recognize and say, okay, police officers are overly aggressive and brutally murder or even abuse people sometimes, and this is something that needs to be stopped, right? We can all recognize this and say Black Lives Matter is a good movement. Now, if the movement starts to say, hey, the solution to this is, getting rid of all police forces and things like that, then sure, we'll disagree with the solution. But to disagree with the facts, that's a problem. This is where I run into issues with people on the right. And this is why people on the right call me a lefty, is because we disagree on the facts. What makes you right or left is not based on facts. What makes you right or left is based on values. So these are not the same thing. I can't all of a sudden be left wing just because I like Black Lives Matter or Antifa or believe that global warming is a problem. Like, none of these things have any bearing on me being right or left. And not everybody has to even be consistent. Like, you can be consistently inconsistent and you can still be right. It's just that you don't have like axiomatic foundations that lead to a broader prescription. And I think that principles are ridiculously important when it comes to how you interact with the rest of the world. How the rest of us treat you should depend on how principled you are. And I did this in the order that I did it in because this is how my tree works. So you start with an axiom that decides the rest of your beliefs. And those beliefs will make you either choose liberty or equality. And I should have moved the liberals probably more towards the middle and made them purple, because liberals are people who have a pretty even desire for equality and liberty. And progressives are more just for equality. And then you can even go farther left than that and find socialists and communists and all of them who are for equity. Equality, we use that word to say like equality of opportunity. So like, there's a finish line down there and we're going to race to it. I might get a 5-yard head start, but if you're fast enough, you still have an opportunity to beat me. If I'm white and you're black and we both go apply for the same job, we have the same qualifications, we both have an opportunity to get that job, but I'm more likely to get it because I'm white. Equity says we both get the job. Equity is equality of outcome. So more like socialism or something like that, where no matter what the scenario, we have the same outcome, especially on the most important things. So like how much money you make, whether or not you have health care, whether or not you have a job, these sorts of things, they want to even the playing field and say, well, if they get a head start, then we're gonna move you up. If they end up 5 yards ahead, we're gonna move you up 5 yards ahead. If they end up being faster than you, we'll move you up another 5 yards. We both want you to finish at the same spot. We both want you to finish at the same time. That's equity. And I have trouble with a lot of people who aren't religious being right-wing, because I don't like, if you believe in rights, I don't know where you believe those rights come from. I'm pretty sure if I was an atheist, I would probably be a progressive. Not even just a liberal, but a progressive. I think that somebody killing me, like, I should have the right to my life, because I was made in the image of God, and God created me for a reason, and I should have autonomy unless God says otherwise. But if you're not religious, it's hard to make that argument. It's hard to say that, like, God has a plan for me, and therefore I can make a bunch of money and be super successful and continue doing God's work because that's what He asks of me. But if I'm not religious, why should I have that opportunity? Why should my individual rights trample over others' chance at equality? And it's not an easy question to answer. It's not. And though I do believe that liberties will lead to equality, it's not in all cases. And that has been proven. It's not in all cases. Sometimes liberty leads to inequity. And so without religion, I don't know how I continue to defend this. I don't know how I continue to defend these beliefs if I can't even tell you where these rights come from, why I have these rights. Outside of the government gave me these rights. If that's what I say the government gave me these rights. Well, progressives are going to say, yeah, we agree. The government gave you those rights. But we think that maybe we should twist and turn and unravel some of these rights and redo them in a different package. You're going to be like, whoa, no. But these are my rights. They're like, yeah, but the government gave them to you, so we can change them. Like, and the government will just give you different ones now. It's all good. That's something hard to argue with if you're not religious. Because if you're religious, you say, no. Like, these are God-given rights. The government just happens to recognize them. They're not giving them to me. But if you're not religious, God didn't give you those rights. So who did? The government. And if the government gave you those rights, then we can change them all willy-nilly. No problemo. This is what I'm here to do. I'm here to educate you and show you what real right-wing ideology is about. Not the fake ones that the Fox Newses and the Ben Shapiro's and all of the other guys put up with their talking points and their rhetoric. I'm here to show you what real right-wing ideology is about. I can't go through all of this every single time somebody asks me, how can you be right-wing though? Like, you're left-wing. I heard you say that you like cancel culture, so you're really a left-winger. I can't go through all of this every single time. So to explain it, I went through all of this today. And I see I've got lots of comments on Facebook and on YouTube and on Twitch. And I appreciate you guys commenting, and I will go back and look at them after the stream. But I'm going to end it there. Anytime somebody challenges me on whether or not I'm left-wing or right-wing, I will send them this video. I'm going to clip this, put it into a video. You'll see it on YouTube and on Facebook in a couple of days. But this is what I'm talking about when I say, like, when people say, like, you know, I'm pretty sure you're left-wing, or I'm pretty sure you're a progressive. Like, I want to go through all of this stuff with them every single time, but I can't. Like, there's normally not time for this. There's not normally an easy way for me to draw all this up for them. So now I got it. Now it's there. Now everybody understands.